time was in Switzerland, that if you wanted to have a watch brand, first, you would have to be Swiss. Second, you would have to work for decades in the industry. And third, and this is the most important, you would have to have a large head of white hair and a long flowing beard so you resembled Santa Claus, or as they say in French-speaking Switzerland, Papa Noel. Yes, I'm talking about luxurywatch. But anyway, all of that has changed. We now have social media, which has become an instrument for a watch image to proliferate around the world and for people to form a consensus and fall in love with it. And that has also allowed some of the coolest minds and interesting people to come up with their own watch brands, such as collector Thomas Fleming and his partner James Kong, with their wonderful neoclassical expression of watchmaking, Fleming. Or a gentleman that has worked for 5 exciting years with George Kern. So exciting that in fact we have George Kern joining us on screen right now. I'm joking, dude. He's like, shit. Sylvain Berneron, which has created a wonderful expression of what he calls unrestricted timing, but it's basically the watch that everyone wants. It's called the Mirage, and it is beautiful. We have auto enthusiast and I would say social media phenomenon, Phil Toledano and his partner, Alfred Chan.
You have to call him a geezer at least once.
Yeah, the inventor of the geezer watch, which have created a beautiful expression of what they call brutalist watchmaking, the B1. Then we have one of the men I admire most in the industry, the only other guy on this stage is as old as I am. He is William Massena. He is a gentleman collector. He's been the head of Time Zone. He's been the head of Antiquorum. He's created Massena Lab. But this is the thing that's most impressive. He's been married 5 times. I'm not joking. He's been married 5 times, correct? 4 times with the same woman, which is even more impressive. Like, why would you do the banking?
Someone just started clapping.
We would have a guy that is inspired by Wong Kar-wai, Constantine Brancusi, Isamu Noguchi, who worked for 4 years at Collected Man, sourcing watches, mingling with collectors, and has been at the, I'm going to say 2 words that's going to make me seem clever, Vanguard and Zeitgeist. Vanguard of the Zeitgeist of shaped watches, and that is Matteo Violet-Vianello with his wonderful brand, Anoma. And we would have a design engineer who has created some of the most interesting modular watches, including Mahareb, inspired by ancient warrior helmets, and with 4 different cases that you can kind of create different versions of a little transformer thing, and that is Sohaib Maghnam. How are you guys? And last but not least, I have to introduce my co-moderator, Mr. Andrew McUtchen, the handsomest man in watch journalism, and the founder of Time&Tide. Andrew, take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, Wei. Now, what I find most interesting about this panel is that at the Watches and Wonders, Jean-Frédéric Dufour described a lot of the activity around Watches and Wonders as the pirates. I don't know if you remember that. It was a great quote. It was another great moment in Watches and Wonders that really cut through. And just as that happened, Richard Bentz and I from Studio Underdog had a piratical moment where we launched the watch out here on the foreshore. And it's interesting to me that, however, scarcely 6-7 months later, we have assembled a band of pirates and invited them onto the ship. So I'd like to get into our questions for these pirates and really just mark the fact that this truly is a pivotal moment for the way that these independent brands, these micro brands, are interacting with the industry. And it's not a little bit ironic that one of the previous pirates of the industry, Moser, invited Studio Underdog to do a collaboration with them yesterday. So we're not only seeing a changing of the guard, we're just seeing a very different approach to, an openness to, and a sort of an acknowledgement that brands like this creative force field on the table here are bringing so much freshness and energy to what we're doing in the industry. But it's also interesting to me that many of us are meeting these people for the first time. We're seeing these watches in the metal for the first time. But over here at Toledano&Chan, we have Phil Toledano and Alfred Chan, who met each other for the first time how many days ago? 3. So tell me about the genesis of Toledano&Chan, because that's just crazy. Just think about it. This watch, the B1, has been one of the most recognizable design statements of the year. It was the first time I experienced it yesterday, but this is the first time they experienced each other. So how was that experience?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was everything I thought I was hoping it would be.
But in seriousness, you guys meet for the first time, you've developed a watch together. Tell me about this unusual process where 2 people who have never been in the same room together can somehow combined for something as powerful and as, I would say, as singular as the B1, which you're wearing, which, again, I'd love, wouldn't it be cool if we could just hand the watches around as we talk? Because so many, hands up who's held the B1 in this room. One, two.
We'll never see them again, though.
So 5 people in this room have held this watch, and yet I'm sure that all of them want to. But please, tell me about how this watch happened from I suppose, like a Zoom room or something?
Well, I think Alfred messaged me in 2020 because I have a clothing brand called Viva Bastardo, and he had bought some Viva Bastardo stuff, so he messaged me, he was like, oh, thanks for the stuff. And I'm not quite sure how, we just started talking about watches, and then suddenly we found ourselves designing a watch for no apparent reason. And we didn't set out to like have a brand, we didn't have an idea. We just felt like there was a thing that was missing from the watch landscape that we really loved. So we just started having these awkward Zoom calls, which actually weren't awkward at all. I mean, I know myself, I'm incredibly hard to work with, but it was incredibly easy. I mean, wouldn't you say you want to add any gems of wisdom?
That's extremely valuable in terms of who to work with. And I know, I mean, as Phil said, I think we found ourselves in a period where a lot of watches weren't what we liked. So we just took a chance and tried to see what we can come up with.
And not only is this a new experience for you to design a watch, but it's obviously your first interaction with the industry. How has it been to sort of be somewhat internet famous and walking around with people probably knowing the watch, but this is really your first interaction with the industry? How is that?
Well, I have been working as a watch designer for a few years now, but I'm not famous, unlike the skis here. No, but this is phenomenal. This is the reception, the messages we get is amazing.
Well, I just think it's entirely well deserved. We are to be recognised for our genius, to be honest. Let's be honest.
Phil, you are someone who described yourself as a sexual athlete, so I think
you caught me on an odd day.
No, thank you very much. Now, if I can move on to Matteo. Matteo, this is our first meeting. I still haven't held an Anoma watch in my hands. What are you hoping to achieve by being here, and has it so far delivered on expectations? I want to see which watch here has been held the most. Who's held an Anoma watch in their hands? Mike Nouveau has, lots more. Wait, you've been working the room, man.
I've done my good job here.
Tell me, how is this, what is the objective of being here? How has the reception been? Did you feel like a pirate?
It's funny, so I found myself coming to Watches and Wonders back in April prior to my launch, and I think in that case, really felt like a pirate. I was kind of like seeing people across the corridor, beelining for them, pretending we'd met before, showing them the watch, kind of like catching people, and so that was really fun because the watch wasn't out yet. It was a great opportunity to show people for the first time, some people who I'd been kind of teasing it to, some people who'd never seen it at all. And so that was like a really fun process, and it's nice coming back now. The watch is it's out there, it's public, it's been shared, and frankly taking things a little bit more easy. Like as you've said, there's a lot of people who've maybe seen the watch online, they haven't had the chance to hold it, so that's been a nice experience. There's also been an element of people who ordered it, who are now seeing it for the first time. Thankfully, no one's been disappointed yet, so that's been positive. But it's nice to come back and see that there's also a lot of other brands doing exciting things, and it feels like if you bump around, you're seeing other people being like licking people's wrists and be like, oh, it's you, and then you're catching up and you've chatted. So it's fun being back.
They saw your very sexy portrait in the New York Times, staring wistfully into the distance.
In my living room, they asked if they could visit my studio or office, and I was like, my living room will have to do.
See, we're witnessing the humble beginnings of what will be future household names. If I can move on to James and Thomas now, Fleming. Let's do the hands up for Fleming and in your posse here. Yes, Letitia, yes. Another quite a good number, yes. Now tell me, it seems to me, I'm going to start with you actually, James, Wei can have Thomas. We're sort of devouring you individually. But James, you are a very well-known photographer and one of the best in the business, waitlisted. And yeah. He has made me want to buy so many watches. I don't know if I'm pleased about that, but it seems
I've gotten zero commission for many of those photos.
I apologize for that. But no, I look at this Fleming watch, and I really recommend, if you haven't looked at any of these watches up close, take the chance, bail everybody up at the end of this, and take a really good, scrutinize these watches. But the thing about the Fleming watch that appeared to me straight away looking at this is it's almost like as a photographer you worked back from the details that you wanted to see perfect in macro. You know, skeletonized lugs, these beautiful and varied finishings, including the hammered rose gold finishing on the center dial of Thomas's piece that he has on his wrist. This is a photographer's dream, this watch. Is it any mistake that you're a photographer? Did you kind of work back from what you wanted?
No, absolutely. I'd say first off, I think Thomas started working on the brand in 2020. I joined in 2022, so he deserves a lot of credit for how the watch turned out. But for me, as a photographer, even before I was a photographer, I was always the kind of person who, I was a lawyer for 11 years. I would be sitting in my office just staring under the fluorescent lights at my watch, turning my wrist over and over, trying to see how different facets, different surfaces interacted with the light. And I think when I got into photography, it was when that kind of appreciation really deepened, because it allowed me to see details of watches that I couldn't see before. It gave me a new appreciation for how different surfaces of watches, polished, brushed, sapphire, metal, how all those different things interact with the light to make a watch captivating or not captivating. And I think it's definitely one of those things that will guide us as we move forward, because I wouldn't say we are trying to design watches that photograph well, but the fact that I've seen so many watches and know what I like and know what comes off well and what doesn't, I think that's something that we'll use to guide us in our design decisions.
One more question. Get a little bit pornographic here if you don't mind, because people are hopefully going to be experiencing these watches later. Tell people about the details of this watch that just turned you on.
Absolutely. There are a lot of details that turn me on about the watch. I'm a lug guy.
You're going with this metaphor.
Right. I really like shaped lugs. In my personal collection of watches, I have a lot of watches that have stylized lugs. And when Thomas showed me his concepts for the watch in 2022, I immediately loved the lugs because I think they're one of those things that have a very outsized impact on how a watch looks and wears, both looking straight on and from different angles. And our lugs, they're both skeletonized. They have these polished, hidden facets, and they're like reminiscent of vintage lugs from a certain era, but also not quite exactly the same.
It's just getting a little bit like that Russell Crowe speech where it just went on, and then the orchestra started playing. But no,
absolutely.
Wei has some very specific lug questions.
I'm a lug guy too, but
this might have to be an after party. Lastly, Sylvain Berneron, it's wonderful to have you here. It is a little bit awkward though, isn't it?
Yes.
The question was, is it over? No, it's a little bit awkward because, well, actually, I wrote a piece for Watch Pro called Tomb Raiders, which talked about how basically warned established brands that if they don't use oddly shaped or unusual and attractive designs from their archive, other brands might take them. I don't know why you're praising me right now. It was a good piece? Oh, thank you. After that was published, and in that there was an example of some watches that have appeared from this panel that might have been inspired by watches from the past. And we had a little interaction about, and I just want to go straight into this. The Mirage obviously has been one of the real, I'd say, leading lights from this cohort. It's a watch, as you say, Wei, everybody wants. I want to raise the crash, and I want to raise this notion of how watches from the past have influenced some watches that have emerged from this group. And I want to ask you to, basically, I'm not going to ask you to read out the DMs, just tell me again this point you make about form following function and function following form, and how that, for you, differentiates the Mirage from the Crash. Because, again, to the untrained eye, let's just go there. Let's talk about the fact that there has been inspiration for this new wave, but let's recognize the context and the new contribution.
Okay, so thank you very much for having us, first of all. Second,
I think there are different ways to land to the same target in life. So the crash carries a lot of character and unicity through the design. Rupert Emerson was a fantastic designer, no question about this, but he drew a free shape, and then the poor watchmaker had to fit a tiny movement in it. In my case, I started from the movement, and the movement is asymmetric because I needed a large barrel, a large balance wheel, a direct second. So I pretty much wrote my Christmas list of the mechanical attributes that I needed. And this comes from a frustration that I had in my previous career where I developed a lot of movements and I always had to choose between one or the other. Is it a scene movement that does not perform, or a seeker movement which performs very well but doesn't deliver on the styling or the proportions that I'm looking for as a designer? So I wanted, and as it happens, breaking the circle allows you to breed a new generation of movements that deliver not only good performance but also good proportions. This is the entire topic of the Mirage, and I called it the Mirage for that reason. It's because when you show up at suppliers, being a one-man company asking for gold bent movements, they tell you to go home and to rethink your idea.
Or a quantity of 10,000.
Sorry?
Or a quantity of 10,000.
Yeah, exactly. No, but frankly, just to quote them, you will recognize themselves. Somebody told me, Sylvain, you're a C-level at Breitling, please go home and rethink, this is professional suicide. You're good. So I had to be very stubborn to do these things. It comes from the artistic education I received from my mother, who was a painter, and I think any good artistic project starts with the courage of doing it and going through the process of personal endangerment. So I want to clap for everybody here. No, but I truly mean it, you know, we spend the cash, we spend the nights, we spend the hours, all of us, and I know how scary it is, you know, to burn the boats and to go for it. So just with that, you like it, you don't like it, but at least I think we've done the personal endangerment of an artistic endeavor.
We should have called this Burn the Boats, actually. This is
Way back to you.
You know, so we were talking initially about how you create a watch brand, and I was being a little bit sort of like farcical at first. But the reality is, until recently, it was kind of an echo chamber of its own ideas. And then you've got guys like you, Bill, and you, Alfred, who are kind of coming from outside of the industry, who are inspired by brutalism. That's going to be the new catchword for the next decade. Everything's going to be brutalist. Those trousers are brutalist. Yeah. But you were inspired by the window of the Met Rohr and Marcel Breuer, who's an incredible designer. But I want to know what this statement means. Alfred, I think when you met Phil, you said, you know nothing and therefore everything is possible. And Phil, when you talked to Alfred, you said, you know, someone that knows everything and someone that knows nothing, that's a weapons grade combination. Tell me a little bit about this wonderful dynamic contrast between ignorance and epiphany.
Well, I'm deeply proud of my ignorance because, as I said, it's an extraordinary attribute, because if you don't know anything, you don't know what can't be done. And so when we were working together, I would always say stuff to Alfred, and he'd be like, "Well, I'm not sure about that," but then it was opening windows to vistas that we hadn't possibly considered. So I think it makes you freer, because I think that the problem with working in any industry is you become burdened by habit, and so people reflexively do things over and over again because they see them repeated over and over again. But when you're coming from outside, you have no habits yet. You are light. But it may have been excruciating for you, so you don't.
No, that's exactly true. I mean, the fact that Phil has no background in design and manufacturing meant that anything was possible. Anything should be possible. So it's a matter of push and pull. No, it's a matter of push and pull. His request versus my design, and then how things are manufactured. It's always a push and pull, I think.
Thank you very much, William Massena. You once described Massena Lab as something that asks the question, "What if?" And initially, you likened your role to that of a film producer. But at some point, you stopped being a producer and became the producer and the director and the screenwriter. And I think the seminal point for that was when you collaborated with Lucas Prana. You made an incredibly charming watch called Old School. Talk to me about the difference between being someone that creates collaborations and taking that massive jump forward and just putting your soul and heart out there.
Can I get the Tinder question? I see my job as a movie director or a producer. So I made movies already been made before, and I made movies, a lot of movies with great directors. And Soprana, for me, Luca Soprana is one of the best watchmakers out there. But when I met him in 2021, nobody had heard of Luca Soprana. And I went to see him in La Chaux-de-Fonds, and we had dinner. And he was like, oh, I've been out in my mountain for a year, I want to do something interesting. And I said, go back to the basic. We have made great watches for Jacob & Co. If anybody of you know the Astronomica or those watches, Luca Soprana designed those watches for anything that's crazy from Jacob & Co. Luca Soprana did it. And I went to him and I said, don't you want to do a watch with two hands, just two hands? No moon, no planets, no fish, no alligator, just two hands. And he said, well, I haven't done this since I was in school. And I said, well, you're going to do a watch like you were in school. And we did that three-hand watch. Actually, we added a third hand. And we call it the old school because it was the watch that he made in school.
Thank you very much. And Sylvain said something really interesting. We could have actually named this symposium Burn the Boats, because at some point, when you put all of your net worth into the creation of your own brand, it's pretty scary. William Massena, at some point, you must have put pretty much everything you had, and I know you probably have a little bit, into the creation of Massena Lab and the future of Massena Lab as well. Was that scary for you?
Okay, so it started, I did one watch with Habring. I don't know if anybody knows Habring in the room, but I did 50 watches with them, and I thought that it would take me a year to sell 50 watches. I was thinking one a week I would be able to sell, and that was in November 2018. We launched the watch, in 5 hours the 50 watches were sold. So I was like, great, I have something, but what do I have next? And I had nothing next. So I took 2019 and I was like, I'm going to do the plans for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So I was a producer, I was the money guy, I had to give money to all my different projects. And we started 8 projects in 2019 for 2020 and 21. When COVID arrived, I was like, I'm done. That's it. Nobody's going to buy a watch because nobody needs a watch. They all have an electric oven at home and they don't need to buy a watch. And how long was I? But it was pure luck because I thought I was, going to remortgage my apartment.
Yeah. Sohaib and Maghnam. So there's a mental condition called obsessive compulsive disorder. In many other jobs, this is very bad, but it's a huge asset if you want to be a watch designer. The only thing is you make things more difficult for yourself. When you decided to make Moharak, the watch that you're wearing on your wrist, you decided you want to make not only a watch that was super futuristic looking and badass, but you want to make it elegant. What's the thickness of your watch?
6.8.
So
Retrograde.
That's incredible. So that's a wandering hour jump retrograde minute indicator with that 6.8. So who created that retrograde module, jump and wandering hour module?
I did.
So talk to me about your obsessive compulsive disorder and how it was manifested in this city.
I don't know if it's OCD, but Phil touched on this. I'm not classically trained in watchmaking, so I went in without a notion of what can be done and what cannot be done. But when I first started designing watches and then taking them to the suppliers to make the watches, I've always had the same answer of no, it's not going to happen. So with at least watch walls, let's say like the case walls, the industry now that tells me 0.8 millimeters, 1 millimeter, that's what I want to do. If you don't want to do that, the watch is not going to happen. It's not going to become a reality. So I've had to do a lot myself, learn a lot to prove them that it can be done. So to this day, I find immense trouble with finding suppliers for my watches. So what I do is I design the watch, I find someone stupid enough to make it for me, and then I take it to an actual watch supplier and say, oh, look, it works, now do it. And it is a blessing in disguise. It makes everything take so much longer than it would, and the process is so much more difficult and so much more expensive. But at the end of the day, I look at a watch and I say, there's not missed opportunity and not missed potential that, oh, I wish I made it this way or not. I made it in a way that actually works. It's really important for yourself to be happy with the product before anyone else is happy with it. And so, yeah, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to not have those notions about watchmaking.
How thin is the top plate on your case?
0.25 millimeters.
Who did you go to get it made?
So right now, to this day, the prototyping company that I work with is a company that has CNC machines for dental work, surgical tools. So they don't have anything to do with watches. They don't understand watches. They don't want to understand watches. But I tell them I want this watch to look this way, and I give them the technical files, and they make it happen. So it works.
Fantastic. Thomas Fleming, the moment I put your watch on my wrist, I just thought it was spectacular, right? But it's interesting to me as well because we live in a world full of big brands, and yet all the guys on the stage have somehow captured everyone's imagination by producing exactly what doesn't exist in many of the big brands. We talked about lugs, James. I love that golden age of Wegner, Croisier, Bourgel, all the shape lugs that we used to see in old Patek's, old Vacherons. Why do you think there's a disconnect from what's being created in the big brands, and why do you feel that you guys have the opportunity to fulfill exactly the type of watches that collectors like yourself want to wear?
I think a lot of it might come down to scale in terms of what we did, where just making 25 tantalum cases in the design we had to go back to the drawing board a couple different times just from an engineering standpoint, because we had the mid case and the lugs were all done separately, and techniques that would work for other metals or other case shapes didn't work in ours, and it ended up taking 2.5 years to make one tantalum case, and we're now up to maybe 7 or 8 right now. So something like that for a big brand that sells tens of thousands of watches a year, even hundreds of watches a year, it doesn't make sense to go through that effort for years and years and years. And we had no idea going into it. I mean, if we'd had to plan anything, we would have blown through whatever deadlines 10 times. So I think that's like a big thing, flexibility-wise, is scale and not having deadlines and not having to be accountable to anyone else.
And let me ask you this, because yes, the watch is stunning, and incidentally, I also applaud the fact that you waited an additional year until the tantalum cases was ready, because eventually the tantalum lugs are attached in a completely different way than the precious metal lugs. You've got a beautiful movement in there, created with our friend Jean-François Maujon from Chronode. But the watch is not inexpensive, let's put it that way. It's a great value for what it is. What would you say to someone that would say, well, what's the authenticity of this brand for the future? How do I know in 10 years you guys will still be around?
You don't. I think, and that's sort of the thing. It can be interesting, or it can be a total turnoff for people too about these new brands, is you really don't know what you're getting yourself into, and that's some of the fun of it. I think for a lot of people is, I think if you're buying a Patek or Rolex, whatever, in a way you're buying into the past. And with us, I mean, you don't know what's to come in the future, but not knowing and getting to sort of be a part of it in a way from the start versus just being another 1 in a million buyer that year is a big part of the pull for people. So I hope we can keep it going, but it's hard. And if you look back 25, 30 years at how many brands have existed even 10 years successfully, it's not too many. So it's a challenge going on, but we're just going to try to make compelling products, and hopefully we can keep doing it.
I think step one is certainly to make something super compelling, and gentlemen, you surely have. Sylvain Berneron. Let's get George Curtin on, just joking. Sylvain Berneron, you mentioned that your watch was kind of like a compilation of every idea that was rejected from you over the last 5 years of working in bigger brands, and perhaps even beyond that. To me, your watch has extraordinary authenticity, as you guys discussed, because of the movement. And it's funny that you were mentioning the crash as well, because eventually the person that designed the first shape movement for the crash skeleton, got asked to leave because she spent too much time on R&D and making things too good. You know, so you don't get rewarded for actually trying too hard in the industry, unfortunately, right? But talk to me about the same thing. You've made a marvelous movement. It's gold. The plates are gold. Everything's asymmetric. That's extraordinary. But it's made by Cirque d'Horloge. And Cirque d'Horloge, as we know, also has just gone through an administration change as well. And Alan Chizer has left. So you guys are working with suppliers. What is the assurance you can give people for the future?
So I think working with this, you have two ways to do it. Either you do the Rolex way and you integrate everything, which in my culture, so I'm a mountain guy from the Alps, my family. Now I live in the Jura. I have one principle. Even if you can, how can I say, make your house bulletproof, and you don't need anybody, if an avalanche or a fire comes and destroy your house, you better have treated your neighbors correctly the weeks or the years before, because you will need them. This is how I've been raised. So I will never integrate everything, because I'm very happy to work with suppliers that I know their wives, I know the name of their kids, I help them with cash when they need, they help me with parts when I need some, and this is how I roll. So, and all the parts of my watches are made in a circle of 50 kilometers around my house. If you live 80 kilometers, we don't work together, not because I think you do a bad job, simply because you are too far from my reach. This is how I roll. And I had, some of them might be in the room, I had amazing suppliers. The recent one was, for example, Wei Koh, fantastic ceramic supplier in Korea. They do the best ceramic in the world. And I told him, look, we ain't gonna work together, not because you do a bad job, simply because you're too far. And this is, I'm a mountain guy. Right? I like to touch people and to work with them. I mean it. So this is how I work with my suppliers, and as you said, it works well, because one of the suppliers is having a tough time, as you said, and I can go there every week, shake hands, make sure the pieces move on the bench. I can check the quality. When it's not right, I take my car, I go to the other supplier and say, please, can you speed up a bit, can we, Saturday morning, make this work? Maybe bring a little bit more money so that your guys can do a morning shift on a Saturday. This is how we roll, and it works.
I absolutely love that. Now changing this from burn the boats to this is how we roll, right? Matteo, it's interesting too, and it's a similar question, Thomas. We have seen this sort of growing affection for shaped watches, but you were the first young guy to boldly go forward and create a completely original shape, which was then you realized that actually people were in love with. Talk to us about that process and why it took maybe someone from a younger generation to show us what we actually wanted to wear.
Yes, I think in my case it was really a sense of there being some really great experimentation in watchmaking when it came to mechanics, some wonderful kind of complications, really interesting work as it comes to finishing, and as well kind of dial side of things, great levels of artisanship. But I felt that the watch case, and especially trying to break preconceptions around what a case should look like, what a watch should look like, was an idea that hadn't been explored in a long time. I think we see it with brands like MB&F and Rohr, but it's always in the service of a certain aesthetic. And I thought this more sculptural approach to watchmaking in the service of something that is more perhaps elegant and restrained and in many ways minimalist and reductionist was not something that I felt was done a huge amount nowadays. And especially when it was done, potentially done in certain price ranges that made it out of reach for a lot of people. So I was very conscious that obviously there's some incredible hits from the past, whether it's Geneva for Patek, some other work that Cartier London did that we just mentioned. But I like the spirit of shaped watches that is one of, you're taking a functional object and you're kind of removing all the stuff that makes it easy to build, is easy to assemble, whether it's a crown, whether it's lugs, whether it's a sense of symmetry, and you're starting to tug away towards bringing it closer to a work of, I hope, something that's more artistic, but still balancing that with functional constraints. And so I liked this idea of what those watches symbolize. And so in my case, it was, I like the spirit of shaped watches, but I also want to create something that feels original. So I looked to outside of watchmaking, similarly to Phil and Alfred with their architectural inspiration. I looked to a table by a French designer called Violet-Vianello from the 50s. She did this kind of freeform tables, and it's how I settled on the shape and then kind of worked at it. But for me, it was really, there's a sense of freedom in these shaped watches, which I think is part of the fun and definitely part of why I identified with it and why I wanted to create something.
Thank you very much. Andrew, I'm going to hand it over to you, but first I think we should announce to everyone that we're going to do our own watch brand as well.
Yes, by the end of this panel.
It's going to be McUtchen Co. He knows everything and I know nothing. This is brilliant. We're going to have the same dynamic these guys have. No, take it away, sir.
No, I did just want to ask you, just following on from that point, why did I tag myself in a picture of my mirror? Why did I tag Anoma watch? And I think it comes down to this this. I mean, it's wonderful to see that shapes are back in watches, and that we're being braver in the design language of the watches we choose, and that a rectangle is no longer the most bold and extravagant way to express a watch. But just explain to me, as my therapist, why did I tag a Anoma watch in a picture of my own mirror? And then you said a lot of people are doing this.
I think a lot of people have serious mental health issues, and it's nothing to laugh about.
I walked straight into that.
But no, it's quite funny. I think there's something about this shape of this kind of stone-like rounded triangle that you end up finding in a lot of different places. And so I think my aspiration is very difficult when you're trying to create a visual that is somewhat new, but at the same time I want it to feel very essentialist. The word timeless gets overused, but this idea that it's almost at home 1,000 years ago and it could be at home in 1,000 years. And so I wanted something that felt fairly universal. And so in my process, it was really a matter of like stripping away as much as possible and ending with something very simple. The result of that in the end was that, you know, after I posted the watch and it kind of became public, you had people kind of spotting the shape a little bit everywhere, whether it's a table mat at a restaurant, stones they find on the beach, a mirror in your bathroom. So it was a whole range, and it's been a really fun part to also see the kind of community also taking part. And I think that's the big appeal for a lot of these younger brands. As I think Thomas references, they feel involved, they feel part of the journey, even if they didn't see the watch or they haven't pre-ordered one. They find it exciting, right, that new things are being done and they're part of that. And so it's something that I really hadn't anticipated, but it's nice that people are kind of like spotting it left, right, and center. And I get loads of DMs as well, and it's been really fun and interesting. And I think it also opens like one client who I hope won't mind me mentioning, who I met recently, who owns a marble quarry in Oman, and he was saying, a lot of the marble pieces I work with, I saw your shape and it instantly reminded me of that. And that's why I felt a connection to it. So there's all this stuff that you don't necessarily think about, but people care about it for different reasons. They connect with it for different reasons, and that's part of the cool.
We've had so many potential names for today. There was Burn the Boats, this is how we roll. But I think Burn the Boats does get to the heart of something really interesting about the people on this panel, and you picked it up, which is you said personal endangerment, which is a very literal way to say that everybody here has risked a lot to be here today, to make something that got them here today. And I would like to ask the panel, just broadly speaking, about the most fearful moment, because I feel that maybe there could be a group therapy session here. We could all, who's gonna admit to the fear that it takes to get to where you sit today? Because one of the things that you talked about, the lack of creativity in some of the big box brands, it's also a lack of personal risk taking. Therefore, you know, things stay the same. So who's gonna admit to being shit scared at any point in this journey?
So I had what my parents consider a real job. I was a lawyer for 11 years. And so to give that up and make a lot less money doing what I loved, that was a hard decision. But I think when I told people I was leaving my job to go into watches, they said, oh, that must be a crazy decision. You must have agonized about it a lot. I wish I had your courage. And in my mind, I was like, it actually wasn't a very hard decision at all. Because for me, having my day job was only tolerable up until the point I realized there was something I was much more passionate about, and that I could also make my life. And in my head, I was like, so few people have that opportunity to do that I would be dumb to not actually make that decision.
It gave me goosebumps. I don't know about anybody else.
I would just say that for us, for me in particular, the peak.
Are you all in though?
Am I all what?
Are you all in?
Semi all in. I'm all in-ish.
I think you're 10%.
10 to 12%. The peak trouser changing moment for me was right before the website went live. Because you know when you're a kid and you have a birthday party and you have the cake and all the biscuits and the sweets and the balloons just bobbing around on the ceiling.
Nobody's arrived.
And no one has arrived, and you're just waiting, like, is the bell going to ring? And so we were supposed to go live at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 to 9 I was like, fuck it, we're just going to go live. Because I just have to see if someone's out the door going to ring the buzzer and say, come to the party.
That was just like revolution with embargoes. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, 5 to 10 to 9-ish. Anyway, so that was it. I mean, it was really. We had no idea if anyone was going to show up to the party, and then we started seeing the sales happen, and I called Alfred. Who knows what time it was in Hong Kong, and we just start screaming at each other.
We saw one!
Yeah, we saw one, that's it! You wanna... Yeah, that was it. That was it. It was a synchronized transit changing experience.
But just to come on that point, because there are people here who have literally remortgaged their house, put the farm on it. This is a little bit of a dalliance for you, or do you feel invested enough that you do feel... I'm sorry. Tell me the truth, though. Tell the people the truth. You're a very successful and creative person. You told me last night about another 3 books you've written that I didn't even know about.
Nothing is a dalliance for me when I'm making something. I mean, and I really regard being able to make something as a privilege. And in particular, if you can make something that people appreciate, it's unalloyed joy for me. So if I'm making something, I'm 100% all in. Ish. Any comments?
Come on, William. We know, I think you have an amazing reputation with all of your partners as well. And if you go to see any of the brands that has ever worked with you, any of the watchmakers that you're working with in the future, they always say he's a great guy because you always live up to what you do. And one of the ways you be a great guy is you reach into your pocket, you take out your money, you put it on the table, and you pay for the stuff that you say you're going to pay for. How much anxiety does that cause you from time?
I look at the ugly American who shows up, drop the money, and order them to do stuff for me.
Not at all.
That's basically like I look like, they're like, oh, that guy who speaks a bit of French and lives in New York City, he's coming, he's gonna pay the mortgage this month. That's what I think they look at me like. Let's sell him 20 watches and make them for him, and he'll do it. I think I agree with Phil. I think that it's very important that it's not because you're doing one thing that you're 100% committed. Phil, I know Phil for 10 years, 15 years. You can be multifaceted person, but everything you do it with your full strength. And it's very important to, maybe even experience other things. I'm very lucky with my skill. I do a lot of different things. And I talk to a lot of different watchmakers. That's, I think, the advantage of doing a lot of collabs is you get feedback from other people. And I think it's much harder to do your own thing by yourself, in your corner, in your mountain, with your neighbors.
Touching people.
Yeah. And it's important. I mean, it is very different. It's much harder to do what he does than what I do at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. I just want to go back to James for a second because I like this idea of him standing in front of his parents and explaining to them after 11 years as a lawyer, he's now going to be a professional watch nerd. Now, I need to put this in some context, and only Alfred will probably understand this. James's parents are Asian. You don't say that shit to Asian parents, right? Because your mother will take a slipper off and hit you in the fucking head. James, does your mom actually understand what you do and does she realize you guys are successful?
So I would say I sort of eased her into it over time. So she knew I was getting into watch photography, so I would send her like photos from my shoes and whatnot. She'd be like, oh, that's really cool, like you must be really into this. And then when I told her, she actually took it really well. And then 2 months later, she told me she was actually really surprised and worried. But by that time, she had already gotten over it. So I'm lucky to have very supportive and understanding parents.
I'm going to open this up to the panel. Sohaib, what does your mom think of your job?
I got the engineering degree, the master's too, so I think I gave them what they wanted, maybe, I don't know. But obviously, what I do now involves more of the knowledge that I received in my training and education. Much more than I would if I had a corporate job, because now I am the person that has to do everything from design to technical development to all of that. So being able to do what I do enjoy and also having the effect that I want to have on the final product, this brings me more joy than anything, and they see that, so they're proud, and I'm happy about that.
Thomas, what does your mom think?
My parents have been really supportive the whole time. I mean, both of them grew up in
This isn't working out like we planned, Wei.
My dad grew up...
Even until someone cries, bro.
My dad grew up in a single-parent household. by grandparents on a farm, and they put themselves through college, and they basically have lived most of their lives doing things not maybe the way that they were passionate about, but just a pragmatic thing. And they've been very supportive in helping give me the opportunity to do something that I was passionate about, and they've believed in it, I think, mostly, but I think there's also some moments of nervousness too.
Sylvain, Berneron, we know how you feel about your neighbors, everyone that's in the 50-kilometer radius. Also, I have to say, you're also the bravest man on this stage as well, because you work with your wife, bro. That is bravo, and I love my wife, but she scares me. Tell me, how did your parents take this idea that you were going from Bright Lane, from this incredibly high-paying job, to do your own thing?
So I'm not sure if my father still knows that I'm doing this business, but when I left house, when I was 18 years old, he grabbed my arm and he said, save 30% of your salary every month, no matter the amount, and in 15, 20 years you'll be able to buy a house for your family. Remember that, do it. Okay, fine. I did it, started working in my career. 15 years forward, I had the cash, and I threw it in the watch project.
Dude, your wife is awesome.
and for the record, I asked her permission. So I do work with my wife, Alex, who is an architect. She today has to work. She's happy to do it, so she will not say, unfortunately. But, so we do this together. I burn only my money, but nonetheless we are married, so I think she's entitled to know what I do with my money. So I asked her the permission if I could do that, knowing that it could turn a lot of money into nothing, frankly. And the scary bit is that there is nothing to fall back on. This is what I mean by burning the boats.
I love that, and I think probably for all of you guys, the support structure you have from your families is probably super important. I know it is for Andrew and myself as well. Andrew, should we open it up to the audience?
I'd love to see what people want to know.
Go for it.
Thank you very much. You're all brave, beautiful, handsome, and very brilliant. My son, I hope, will be like all of you, in particular, Sylvain. A very simple question. Please don't take it as a feminist question, but are there any lady pirates out there? And if not, why not? I'm genuinely interested.
That's my lawyer, by the way. and she's a great lawyer, so if you want to have IP problems, you go to her.
Solutions.
Yes. Thank you, Olivia, for the question. That was planned. No, it wasn't. I think changing. I think there has been some women in the industry, very few. There's very few that started the brand. I'm thinking about skulls. Danek Kruger. There are a few women that are in the panel. I guess.
We have Eva Loeb in Australia.
Oh yeah, Eva, of course, the first woman in the HCI. I guess you have to thank those two guys for not inviting ladies here. There's too few of them. And I think it's an issue in Switzerland. I think it's very big Swiss issue. People in Switzerland have a tendency to think female watch journalists don't know anything about technical things. There's that mentality, but I think it's changing really fast. And we see now journalists, people getting out of the PR business to do more watchmaking. And if you go to La Chaux-de-Fonds, Neuchâtel, you see more and more women that are watchmakers, and that's great.
We have a symposium tomorrow at 2:45 p.m. on women leaders in the watch industry. And I would say, maybe not in the smaller brand space, but look at Audemars Piguet, right? CEO, woman. Chief brand officer, woman. Head of complications, woman. Director of communications, woman. And it wasn't like it was planned. They were just the best people for the job. And that's what I really respect about that. Pirates. We'll find you some. But I need your number into that. Any other questions?
Hey, thank you so much for such a great panel, very entertaining. I work with a wide variety of different industries, and I feel like the luxury watch one is one of the only ones where you're trying to turn back the clock with no pun intended. and you have the whole like innovative technology sphere, AI, blockchain, all these technologies, where a lot of other industries are really trying to kind of see what's next, but kind of go further forward. How are you using any of these innovative technologies, any of them AI, big data, and the likes, to kind of further power or move ourselves forward in your respective projects?
I'll answer this not because I use AI, but because I'm against the use of AI in this. So I think, while of course we all know how important it is, and I do embrace technological advancement, as watchmaking becomes more and more of an art form, why not just hold back to something that we can do so well without using the generated designs of AI and all of that? So, for example, I know that some companies now use blockchain for warranties, and I'm all in for it if it's something that makes the watches safer and if it makes it easier to track them. Good, amazing. But once those technologies become involved with the design and manufacturing of something that is supposed to be art, art is human, art is imperfect, this is where I think maybe it's a dangerous predicament to embrace that so easily, and because, you know, there's a million people that will be able to press a button on a website to generate an image of a watch that I've never seen, but there's very, very few people who are able to do it without, you know, without that input. So for now, I'm very, very happy that all these gentlemen, including myself, we're not doing that.
Alfred and I make extensive use of FaceTime, so that we've really embraced technology.
Let me just, and yes, Astrid, it's interesting actually, because in 2015 when the Apple Watch dropped, for those of you who were at Basel Fair, it was like they set off an atomic bomb. Everyone was like terrified. They were running around going, oh my God, it's all over. You cut to 10 years later, and actually mechanical watchmaking has become more popular than ever. It's actually connected with Gen Z more than perhaps even their parents. It's almost as if, and there's an American historian that said, that which the son seeks to forget, the grandson seeks to remember. And if you look at the type of watchmaking that's most popular today, it's craft-based watchmaking. It's the stone dials that we see here, it's the shape lugs that we see there, it's finishing, it's inner angles, it is craft and creativity. So I find that to be quite remarkable. So far AI hasn't completely come and dominated that, but maybe they can't replicate that. Well, they can probably not replicate all of these guys, they can definitely replicate them, but that's fine. Astrid, go for it.
Hello, I'm Astrid from Street, it's an independent media. You're all risk takers, you're all entrepreneurs, and I would like to know, who is the person, who is your superhero? Who is the person who inspires you? Who's the person who made maybe that click in your head? I'm going to make that jump into the emptiness, into the unknown, because you are going to be a source of inspiration for us, but we would like to know, who is your source of inspiration?
Why don't we just have the whole panel go for it?
I can start. I don't have names in mind. More than someone, I admire the resilience and the courage. I admire when someone jumps to start something, whatever it may be. But I also admire the resilience to keep pushing. The dark night, where you're alone, nobody claps for you, and you do it anyway. This I admire. It doesn't matter what you do. That's the mindset. So, my neighbor, any of you guys, when it's dark and you keep pushing, huge respect.
Thomas.
For me, I'd say it was probably Ming more than anybody else, where if you look at his background, like everything is pretty much the opposite of what you'd expect for someone who is successful in watchmaking, but he made it work, and has made it work really well, and I think in part because he's so different from literally everyone else traditional industry.
James?
So for me, Ming as well, but also Max Busick, because I think he's the one who really opened the door to so many other people like us who came before, who, he's not a watchmaker, he's not a traditional engineer or constructor, but he was able to find the best people for the job, have a vision, and execute that vision. And I think that for me was a sea change in the world of watchmaking, and I think a lot of us owe a lot to him.
Awesome. Sohaib?
They burned both my cards, because I definitely relate to what you said, and also, of course, Max. Max was someone who was so open to talking me the first time because Jakob Korbo of GMT, he just sent me a photo of a watch that I had created, and Max reached out and he said, okay, let's have a Zoom call, let's go. And he's so supportive of young talent, he's so supportive of newcomers, that it's, I do believe that he's changed the game for better, but also Vianney, Ulberg, David Toon, they're all people that are just really on top of the game.
Matteo?
This might sound like the answer you would give, but I mean it sincerely. It's a lot of the people around this panel, because I think when you decide to take the leap, it's almost not a decision, it's something that kind of like possesses you. You don't have a choice, you're kind of putting hour after hour, everything you own into this, and you kind of, it's a little bit of a calling in a way once you feel the feeling. But throughout that journey, there's a lot of really scary moments, a lot of very lonely moments. And the great thing, I mean, I remember like Sylvain and I having like coffees in a park somewhere, and kind of being like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. And also, you know, I think with Thomas as well, you know, late night Zoom calls where you're kind of like reassuring each other, like whatever happens, we all kind of put so much of ourselves in the things we've chosen to create. There's a genuineness and sincerity there, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, at least you've kind of gone out there, created something that's truly your own, and there's few people who've done that, who have the kind of creative courage to do that. And so, funnily enough, it's like, you see these big lofty figures, and they're inspiring in their own way, but seeing other people who are going through the same journey, and it maybe seems slick from the outside, but then once you peer in and having a conversation, everyone's slightly freaking out as well.
Who's talking about you, bro?
That's been a really big source of inspiration throughout the process.
Amazing, thank you. William?
It's a guy called Gunther Blumlein. Somebody that most people have never heard of, maybe Sylvain, of course, you have. Gunther Blumlein is the person we revived at Lange and Söhne. He was the CEO of IWC and Gégère Lecoutre, and he decided to restart. And this is a very important moment. It's 30 years ago this year, and I think it was a phenomenal moment in the industry, and I don't think any of us would be here without him.
It's actually one of my manager when I was about 25, about 10 years ago now. He said something like, Alfred, you have to build something of your own or with a fantastic partner before you turn 40. Otherwise, it's too late. You will never be many things. You build many things. But no, he said something like, if you don't build something for yourself before you turn 40, you will never be comfortable enough to build it after. After you have kids, after you have family, it's no, but then a true gentleman partner is needed.
Well, obviously Gunther. Okay, well, not to sound like a raging narcissist, but it will sound like that, but me. Because
the truth comes out.
Because I think that when I'm interested in something, I have to make something, and when I have to make something, I have to try and make something new, and I have to try and make something beautiful and extraordinary if I can. And for me, I really feel, as I said earlier, it's such a gift to be able to have the chance to make something, and I'm an artist by profession, so this is kind of what I do, is I just, and then also, aside from my great gloriousness, I would say the second thing that's really incredible is, as people have mentioned, just having friends that I can endlessly pester with, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like Mike Nouveau in the back there. He's suffered through endless iterations of this watch.
I'm going to ask Andrew, actually, who's your inspiration?
I'm going to just flip the script a little bit and talk about a sports person, Andre Agassi. I read his book, and he talks about having to be 7% better every year to stay the same. And I think that fact alone has always inspired me just to push that bit harder. And again, it sounds sort of banal when you say it amongst all of this much multi-layered greatness at this table, but I find there's something about sport and about watching great sports people like Agassi that inspire me. about you, Wei? Come on.
So I'm going to follow up with what William Massena said, but the other side of that equation. So not Gunther Blumlein, though I respect him a lot, Walter Lange, because Blumlein and Lange were upstarts in their own right. So check this out. Walter Lange wants to be a watchmaker his whole life. So he's ready to go, but then it's the Second World War. So he gets conscripted and he gets sent off to the Russian front and he gets shot. So he comes back and he's healing up and he's recuperating and finally he's okay. So he goes to Lange to become a watchmaker finally. It's the day just before the Allies declare an armistice. And Lange & Son gets bombed. He and his uncle spent 2 years building Lange back up. And the Russians come to them and they say, listen, we've now been subsumed into the GUB, so you now have to make watches for the Soviet army. And he says, I don't want to. And he says, that's perfectly fine. You're going to go down to a uranium mine. So he escapes to West Germany. And there, he lives for 3 decades, looking over at what should have been his ancestral watch brand, but being completely disconnected from it, until the wall falls. And he gets a call from Gunther Blumlein, who's like, what's up, dude? We're gonna take Lange & Son and we're gonna restore it to its place of glory. He's over 60 years old when they say this to him. And he's like, I'm in. And they go back and they kick ass with Lange & Son and they build it up into this titanic success. And he lives over another 20 years because he's so into what he's doing. So if he can do it, and these guys can do it, all of you guys can do it as well. Thank you very much. And McUtchen, Sylvain, James Collins, Sohaib, Matteo, Violet-Vianello, William Massena, Alfred, and Toledano&Chan.